Well, why don't we just sit comfortably. We'll do our initial 5-minute meditation just to get ourselves here. As you hear the sound of the bell, I never lit the candle. One thing I forgot. I'm setting up for 2 hours and I didn't light the damn candle. It's okay.
You're not perfect?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so not perfect. And, you know, it's hard to believe how well it went, though, but appreciate your help. All right, so sit comfortably and close your eyes. And as you hear the sound of the bell, let it clear your mind and bring your attention to this moment. And then when the bell fades, just stay here and try to be in that silence in your mind. And we'll begin by taking 3 deep, relaxing breaths together. First deep breath in. And exhale. Second breath in. And exhale. Third breath in. And exhale. Now continue breathing deeply but gently into your abdomen. And let your breath comfort you and soothe you. Try to breathe as slowly as you can without it becoming uncomfortable. As you're breathing slowly, with each exhale, let your body relax. Let even the most subtle tension go. Let the muscles in your face relax. and bring your attention to this moment. Be aware of the room that you're in, the sounds, the smells, the tastes. The sensations on your skin. Feel the energy of the people around you. Smile and be present for the next few moments until you hear the bell. Welcome everyone to Satsang. We've been talking about a lot of the uncomfortable energy that comes up for us. Anxiety, anger. And last time we spoke about anger, which is a very interesting energy. Have you been noticing more and more when even the subtle anger is coming up for you? Have you been noticing when someone around you is getting angry?
Why are you looking at me?
That's just a coincidence. I just want to check in with Facebook for a minute. I want to say hi to Raquel. Lucas, how are you? Diego, good to see you. Stacy, wish you were here. Thought I would see you tonight. If you have any comments, feel free to post them and I'll try to get to them, okay? Let me bring the lights up just a little. I'll bring them up a little more in a second. You know, being an Italian guy from New Jersey, anger was something that was like bred into me, you know? And I didn't even notice when it was really anger that was there. So it's extraordinarily important that you first recognize when anger is arising. Really, really important, because once you start to get angry, that's when the wheels start coming off the cart. That's when you don't see clearly. That's when you say things you don't mean, do things you don't mean, make poor choices. we're not choosing from clear wisdom mind, right? But if you're not aware that you're angry, what can you do about it? Sometimes anger feels like righteousness. Sometimes it feels like you're sticking up for yourself. Sometimes it feels like you're righting a wrong. But when that anger starts to grab you and vibrate, you have to recognize it for what it is, and because we never cultivate anger, we never operate from anger, we never think from anger, act from anger. What do we do with anger? Embrace it. And what? Let it go. Let it come and let it go. Because we know if we resist it, we're bringing our attention to it, right? And when we bring our attention to it, what happens? We make it stronger. Anything you bring your attention to, you make stronger, right? So you have to be aware that you're human. These things are going to happen. In the teaching, we lost the feed for some reason. What happened? Yeah, would you just see if it's on and... Camera's on. Can you guys see me on Facebook? Hang on, I'm unplugging and plugging in again. Let's see what happens here.
Sometimes it just drops for no reason.
If that's on, well, I hate these darn technical difficulties.
You have Wi-Fi? For your signal?
Yeah, I mean, it was on. It started before. If you guys can hear me on there, I'm going to try and restart, okay? We're back. Okay, sorry about that, Facebook folks and live folks. Notice how I'm not angry.
You're saying to not pay your attention to it, but yet you have to face it and not deny it.
Would you use a microphone, please?
Otherwise you're pretending you're not angry.
Just turn it on and repeat that for me.
You're saying to not put your attention on it, but yet I thought you have to face it and not pretend that you're not angry. You know, say, yes, I'm angry. Give me time to just cool down.
Well, yeah, you have to first, awareness is, 90% of our spiritual practice. You can't change something that you're not aware of. So if you're simply aware of it, you're doing very well. But once you are aware of it, you want to be able to take your attention away from it and not act from it. So you let it come and you let it go. The reason that you let it come is because if you resist it and try and push it away, you're only going to strengthen it because you're feeding it with your attention. Okay? But as it's here, you don't want to hold on to it either. You just want to let it go. You want to let it blow by you like a breeze. Because you are human, and these things will arise in you. So don't think that your practice is bad, or what you're doing isn't working, or anything like that when you're becoming angry, because that's not true. You're human. You have ancient wiring. You have tendencies. You have conditioning. This is a very hard machine to operate, this mind-body. The more you are aware of it, and the more that you understand it, the more fun life is, Are there any questions on anger, comments on anger, anything anybody wants to say? Anybody angry about anything? I know you are, but that's okay. We talked also about anger being a code word for fear. Okay? That there are two basic emotions, you know. I'm not, every time I write the satsang, I always start telling it to you before we start reading it. So instead, Rosanna, would you do me the honor? And if anybody wants any extras, feel free to take them. Pass them out. Make sure you pass them from the top because they have the most recent. I'm going to bring the lights up for you. All right. So this one is written by me. So it's going to be fantastic. All right. Rosanna, would you like to read or do you not read yet? Okay, that's fine. Sherry, would you kick us off?
Fear. There are two basic emotions, love and fear. We all know what love feels like. Of course, I'm not talking about in love, that goofy high feeling we get when we meet someone to which we're attracted. I'm talking about that warm feeling that comes over you when you open your heart and love unconditionally. Perhaps you felt it at the time of a birth of a child or adopting a pet. It feels very good. It feels like home. If it doesn't feel like that, then it's a form of fear.
So we know what love feels like, right? You know, I posted something on Facebook, this week. Someone made a medley of like dogs that were really happy to see their owners. And these dogs were just so full of love. And it was just so amazing to watch them and how good it made me feel just to watch how loving dogs are. And they're just wide open and they're so happy and they're jumping all over these people. And just seeing that was an amazing feeling. You know, love is our nature. How do you know that? Because when you're in your nature, it feels good. Hatred and anger, and fear feel terrible. So your own body and your own feeling is your own compass, right? That kind of will point you toward, hey, this feels good, do this. This feels terrible, don't do this, right? So again, there's nothing to believe here. Look to your own experience and see if what I'm telling you is helping make clear what you're experiencing. Your body is telling you. I'm not telling you be loving and kind because you should, and I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you, you want to have a fun life and you want to be happy, be loving, kind, compassionate, and patient. Not because you should. Allow your nature to just come out of you. And you will notice how good it feels. The minute that you are loving and kind because you want something back, won't feel good, right? That's not the same thing. So loving kindness is extraordinarily beautiful, interesting, and yet our mind will talk us out of it every 5 minutes. Give us wonderful reasons to withdraw our loving kindness. Sean?
Fear comes in many forms. Some code words for fear are anger, frustration, worry, anxiety, depression, loneliness, aggravation, and so on. We don't immediately recognize these things as fear-based, but we can see that none of these things feel like love. So the only thing left is fear. In other words, what's causal in these things is fear.
What's causal in those?
Causal, yeah.
What's causal in those states is fear. If ever you look at when you're feeling worry, anxiety, depression, loneliness, There's some damn fear there. And I think that a lot of this fear is kind of, as we evolved, there was a lot to be afraid of. If you look at animals in the wild, even not in the wild, if I look at Willow, if I move too quick, he's like, what are you doing, man? And so we developed this very natural fear, and I think this is one of the things that we're starting to evolve out of. We're starting to evolve out of this identification with mind, and we're starting to evolve out of fears that are not really pertaining even to the moment. That are not really, I keep wanting to say the word rational, but that sometimes fear just come up in you for no reason. Sometimes you're laying in bed and all of a sudden you feel all of this weirdness. There are lots of different energies and things that can provoke that. But if we're aware of it, we can work with our fear. If we're aware of it, we don't have to be afraid of our fear. When these states arise in us, worry, anxiety, loneliness, all of these wonderful things that, if you walk down Atlantic Avenue, you see lots of bars and people sitting there, drinking, placating their fears. That's why we do those things, because we get to these uncomfortable states. But what if fear came and you weren't afraid of it? And you were like, I'm just feeling fear. I talk about my childhood a little bit when I got the strap and the wooden spoon. I grew up, fear was, how they were going to make a man out of me, And they were just passing on what they knew. There was nothing malicious about it. Nothing horrible about it, but it was just conditioning and what they knew. But fear is very familiar to me. I was raised in it. Not everybody was. Let's continue. James?
Fear can be obvious and fear can be subtle. If large dog is growling and threatening you, your fear is obvious. That kind of fear comes and goes quickly. The fear that we are going to focus on is that persistent, low-grade fear that I call mailbox fear. Mailbox fear is that tiny little uh-oh you feel sometimes on your way to the mailbox. Sometimes you even take a deep breath before opening it. In that moment, that persistent, low-grade fear is present.
Do you understand what I'm pointing to here? Maybe you're expecting some bad news or something like that, or you're just, I don't know, you have a weird feeling, you're going to the mailbox and there's this weird sensation, right? It's that uh-oh, what now? You're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Do you know what I'm talking about? This is the fear that I want to focus on. Because the obvious fear, we don't need to talk about. When that fear is there. A big dog growling at you and you feel fear, that's fight or flight. But we tend to be in that fight or flight far more often than it was intended. There are different fears in the modern age. Fears of getting sued, fears of losing all your money, fears of whatever. All kinds of fears. And so that circuitry, is kind of getting adopted into modern society. And fear is just no fun. It's just so terrible to be afraid. Has anybody here been afraid before? What's it feel like? Woo! There are hardly words to describe it, right? Say again? So would you speak into the microphone for me? You don't want to. Then speak louder into my microphone, okay? Yeah, you know, it's funny how it's fear, right? You're feeling it right now. It's your microphone fear, right? You know, it's on this path of enlightenment, there comes a point where you live without fear. So imagine if you're able to transcend thoughts and transcend fear, go beyond thoughts, to be able to rest in a place of in your mind that is just silent. And then to not experience fear. Because the weird thing is you're creating the fear for yourself, right? How do I know that? Does the fear exist outside of you? No. Only in your head. You can be completely frightened, and I could be sitting next to you, eating popcorn, watching a movie, not caring. So we know that so much of this that is happening happens unconsciously. And we're trying to become conscious of it. How do we know that it happens unconsciously? Because there's no way in hell that you would consciously create that for yourself. No way. No one ever sits down and says, hey, I think I'm going to conjure some fear up in me. I'm feeling a little too relaxed and life's going too well. So, you know, I need to muddy the water a little. And that's what's so interesting to me about being human, is that my mind unconsciously has been really trained to conjure states that I don't want to experience. Isn't that weird? But we sure get there, don't we? We sure get there. And so, for all of our lives, we've been doing this unconsciously. So we really need to understand that it's going to come. Okay? Man, this thing cut out again. I'm just going to have to keep restarting it. There's nothing I can do. Give me 1 second. Sorry for the distraction, folks. But we don't want to fight with our humanity, you know? You really want to embrace your humanity, like Ron said. You really want to understand that this is a complicated machine that has been wired, sort of on its own. And so you're having to deal with this wiring. You're having to deal with your ancient wiring, the evolutionary wiring. You understand what I mean when I say that? Yeah. Well, there's lots of good things about being human. There's lots of fun things about being human. So we can't forget that. But when these things come, we want to be gentle with ourselves, and we want to honor that part of ourselves, but we also want to let that part of ourselves go. We don't need it. What do we need it for? And the more that you see clearly, and in the coming weeks we're going to be having some satsangs on impermanence and change, but the more that you see clearly, the more you realize there's nothing to fear. But that takes great devotion to your practice. Let's continue. Tatiana, would you read?
I'll read. Mailbox fear happens often throughout the day. A boss may look at you funny or ignore you. Your significant other doesn't call when they are supposed to, or you feel a funny pain in your body. There are a myriad of triggers for these fears. What's important is to begin to recognize when subtle fear is present. For many of us, it's there so often, it's just normal, and we don't notice it. Nonetheless, it does affect our thinking, choices, and behavior covertly.
Covertly. Behind the scenes. You know, for most people, a lot of what drives their choices is fear. It's not really love. Most people are not moving toward what they want. They're moving away from what they don't want. It's a very different thing. It was an interesting, I think it was Jim Carrey said something very interesting. He's done a couple of commencement speeches, and he said he was watching his father, who was also like into comedy and things like that, and he saw his father said, "Oh, you can't make a living this way," and he went and did something that he didn't like, and he worked there for like 15 or 20 years and got fired. And he said, "I realized in that moment that you can fail at doing something you don't even like and don't want to do. So why not do what you want to do?" You know what I mean? And it's fear that stops people from doing that. You know, my life does not look like most people's lives. But I was able to face my fear and live the life that I want to live. And somehow I did it. Somehow I found ways, you know? When you're committed, when there's no plan B, you can have whatever life you want. The thing that stops you is you. The thing that stops you is your own fear. You know, there's these little subtle fears. You know, someone doesn't call, you don't get a text, excuse me. You feel a little pain in your body, and you, oh my God. Those are all opportunities to work with fear. To notice that fear is there and just let it go. Am I making sense? Fear is such a weird conversation. You know, we don't even like to talk about fear, you know? But when we look fear straight in the eye, you know? There's really nothing to be afraid of. When we get to the talks about impermanence, and we start talking about Buddha's lovely conversations about how you're going to get old and sick and die, you know, but not in a morbid way, in a very constructive way. In a way that you get that what you have... See, this is why practice and this understanding is so important. Because when you realize, truly see clearly that the only thing that you have is this moment, and this moment becomes the most important thing to you, then you start living. Then you start having fun. And it's really fun. But our minds were just so programmed for the opposite. You know, this life is like just such a paradox sometimes, you know? It's so weird. You know, why are we so wired to, you know, to screw ourselves over? I'm going to try this one more time, and then I'm going to give up. Tatiana, you want to read the next one?
Most often, our fears come from past experiences. We start off early in life, cruising along fine until one day something happens. Our goldfish dies. It's shocking and scary. I was in kindergarten when it happened and I was so sad. I didn't know things could die. It was my first aha. If Rusty could die, what else could?
Rusty, my little goldfish. I was in kindergarten. And I came home and he was floating in the bowl. And I was mortified. I had no idea what death was. And I remember like shaking and looking at my mom like, what the hell happened? And she's like, oh, he died. I'm like, what's that? She's like, it's what happens. And she kindly explained it to me. But I was, whoa. And you can imagine the thoughts that came after that. When I started realizing that my parents were going to die, that people in my life were going to die, people that I love. And it started to provoke some fear. Start to give me something to be afraid of. But when you realize that impermanence is the way, what's there to be afraid of? It's just what happens. Shall we continue, Ron?
Without digging up any scars, we have all had scary experiences and sometimes traumatic ones. They get in our meat. What I mean by this is we find ourselves having visceral responses to certain stimuli of which we may or may not be aware. Sometimes it just envelops us and we get jumpy. We begin to move more quickly and become hyper-vigilant. Think of when you approach a deer. But most times we are uncertain of the cause of the fear. We're too busy ignoring it, trying to push it away. We don't want it. We don't really want to revisit from where it comes. We just want it gone as quickly as possible.
I noticed this about myself, that when I'm starting to feel afraid, I start moving more quickly. Do you notice that? And I start, and I'm like, that's how I kind of get clued into what's going on for me, because you've really got to become a very excellent and astute observer of yourself. You've got to look for your own cues. You've got to look for your own like tells, you know what I mean? In a poker match. When you know yourself, you can work with yourself. When you don't know yourself, these unconscious things, they just run and create discomfort. So much of what we practice here is about awareness. It's about awareness. It's about awareness. If you're not aware that you're experiencing fear, what can you do about it? You have to be aware. A lot of times these things, it's so much easier to see these things in other people, but it's hard to recognize them in yourself. But you've got to be willing to acknowledge when you're afraid. You've got to be willing to notice, man. And the minute that you bring your attention to it, it really you like take the air out of it. The moment you recognize you're afraid, it takes it from like an 8 to a 5. And then when you look at the fear and breathe with the fear and let it go, you can bring it down to a 2 or a 3. And then when you really practice getting present in the moment, you can dwindle it away to something very subtle. Remember our famous Mark Twain quote, right? I've experienced many terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened. You know, what's scaring the hell out of you is your own mind. Life is just the way life is, and it's very plain and very obvious. It's just that your mind doesn't want to accept that. And these conversations, like I don't want to get into some of the ones we're going to have in the weeks to come about impermanence, but you know, making sense? Sherry, you want to read or do you want to skip? Okay. Sure. I think we have 2 mics on that side. Would you?
Thank you. Okay, where are we now?
Yeah, on the back page.
Fortunately, aren't you glad there's...
That can lead, right?
That can lead. Okay, that can lead to some troubling behaviors like addictions or majority of acting out behaviors. We're running from the discomfort that fear creates inside us, and boy is it uncomfortable. It's also sticky. It sticks to us. We can get rid of it. We can get it off us, and all we want is it off us, just like quicksand. The more we struggle against it, the more it sucks us in. Living in fear is a difficult and uncomfortable way to live, even if it's subtle.
Yes. So fear creates a lot of discomfort. And when we experience discomfort, what do we want? Comfort. And so we turn to things like drugs, alcohol, sex, food, shopping, television, just to placate our pain. But again, you have to be aware that you're doing that. You have to be aware that what's happening is that you are in discomfort and you don't know how to deal with your discomfort. If you know how to deal with your discomfort, there's no problem. I highly recommend having a physical list, like your Zen list, right? Things I do when I'm off. Things I do when I'm feeling uncomfortable. Why? Because one, when we're feeling uncomfortable like that, we don't think clearly. We don't see clearly. And our water is very muddy. Our mind is very muddy, and it's just hard for us to be rational. But if you have a list, you don't have to think about it. And there can be some very simple things. One of the things that I really love to do, aside from cleaning my house, that's always like number one, clean my house from top to bottom, I always feel better. Getting in water changes my state. Whether it's a warm shower, or jumping in the pool, or jumping in the ocean, immediately, state change. Cleans me up. Do you notice that? Does it happen for you too?
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We sit and ache and sit with our fear and oh my God. And when you can just get up and go jump in the pool. Or take a hot shower. Get some sunshine. Listen to music. Go be in nature. You know, you got to help yourself. You got to work with yourself. The machine that you're trying to navigate, you know, has got a lot of cross wires. It's creating things you don't want to experience. So you got to help it. It's just we've been ignorantly wired that way. If you have a list of things that you do when you're just feeling off or you're trying to snap out of this inner state that you don't like, then you grab the list and you can pick something and just go do it. But if, would you use the microphone, please?
I think it's getting control back. When you feel out of control,
Would you hold the mic to your mouth?
You can feel, I don't know, is it working?
Yeah, that's it.
I think if you're out of control, you feel more fear. And by doing those things, it kind of gives you a little more control. You know, if you have a list to go by, you just go into action and do it. And you get a little bit of control again. You may just feel, you just don't know what to do. So that kind of aligns you again.
What are you out of control of?
I think a lot of times you don't know what it is.
It's your own mind. See,
Right.
that's the scariest thing.
That's true. Yeah.
Is like, we've seen our mind come off the rails, right? That's what scares us the most. You know, sometimes in life, our minds have gotten to a point where it was just drunk driving the bus right off a cliff. And that's the problem, is that you don't trust your mind, ultimately. And so when you say, yes, you're losing control, but what you're losing control of is your mind. And your mind is starting to just be in this cascading reaction. Sometimes, like when you're angry, you know, you ever been angry and getting ready to yell at somebody or yelling at them, and there's this little voice in the back of your head that's saying, don't do that. Very calm voice. You are gonna so regret this. You're like, shut up and watch me. And you go, but there's a part of you that is not participating in that. There's that part of you that is the awareness, that is aware of all things outside you and inside you. And it's even aware when things are coming off the rails. But that's the ultimate fear, I think. Am I going to go crazy? Is my mind just going to start doing things that I can't control? If you're practiced, the answer is no. One of the reasons that fear is leaving me is because I trust myself. I trust my mind. I trust that whatever comes down the pike for me, my mind is not going to come off the rails. I know that for a fact. It just doesn't bother me. So when you train your mind and you trust your mind and you can stand in the face of whatever, sometimes you'll feel still the trepidation, but you're just observing the trepidation like the orchid. You just, yeah. That's the difference, is that the consciousness is what's driving the bus, not the mind. In this process, in your practice, the mind becomes the humble servant. It's no longer the tyrannical ruler. It doesn't get to do whatever it wants. Whether you realize it or not, it can't do anything that you don't agree to anyway. You've got to bring your attention to it. You've got to participate in it. The moment you don't, it's gone. So is any of that garbage significant? No. Is there anything to figure out? Nope. Just let it go. Just take your attention away from it. Bring your attention to the present moment. In the most difficult moments of your life, if you're just present, you'll find they're not really that difficult. They just are. It's your mind that makes them difficult. That's why it's important when things are good to practice. Because what do you know? All things change. And there's change is going to come. Impermanence is going to come. And you need to be ready. If you're practicing, if you're taking care of yourself, if you're doing your Zen list, you can ride the momentum of your practice through that. But if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not practiced, it's going to be more difficult. Make sense? Any questions, comments? Who's up, Jamie?
Fortunately, aren't you glad there's a fortunately after all that? I can reveal you the root of fear, and your practice will help you eventually end it. The root of fear is attachment. If you look at your fears, they are always based around losing something. Losing your home, pet, job, money, partner, and even your own life. Fear is always connected to a loss of some kind.
True? You know, attachment is really one of the major sources of suffering. And listen, you know, you lose a loved one, you're going to be sad. You know, sadness is not suffering. Don't make that mistake. You know, sadness is a cathartic way of processing through, you know, the loss. And it's wonderful to be sad. You can have great peace and joy with your sadness. And you can experience your sadness fully. And you feel good. Notice when you're sad. Notice when you have a cry, right? You feel better. I remember when I was a little kid, you know, my grandmother. I went over to my grandmother's house and I said, "How are you today, Nan?" And she looked at me and said, "Oh, Tom, I had a good cry today." And I thought, what does that mean? Now, she had 10 kids, so that might have something to do with it, right? But I thought, boy, that's so weird, you know? But I completely understand that now. You know, there's so much to being human, you know? And we've got to work with our humanness. And when you're sad, be sad. It's okay to be sad. But don't torture yourself in your mind after your sadness. Oh, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been me. It's what happened. Even when it's tragic, what happens, happens. You suffering what happens is foolishness. It doesn't do anything. Nothing. Zero. Again, sadness is not suffering. Sadness is cathartic. Sadness is healing. All things change. All things are impermanent. States come and go. You come and go. The person you think you are comes and goes. Everything is in a constant state of flux. And when you resist that, fear, suffering, anxiety, just how it is. You get what you get. Well, let's continue.
The easiest way to see this is to turn it around. If you were not concerned about losing your home, pet, job, money, partner, and even your own life, what's to fear? Now, I'm not taking some nihilistic point of view that nothing matters. I'm saying when you lose your attachment to these things, fear can no longer touch you.
Sometimes I can make things so crystal clear by showing you the opposite of what I'm telling you. I really love doing that because it's so crystal clear. Imagine if you weren't attached to your house, your money, your pet, your significant other. If you had no attachments to those things, what could trouble you?
The weather.
The weather. I'm sure you could find something if you look close enough, right? You what?
Like being a robot.
Actually, it's not like being a robot. I understand why you would say that, but that's why I said this is not some nihilistic point of view. You know, nihilism is just the idea of like nothing matters, right? Like, can you explain nihilism? It's, you know, that everything is meaningless and pointless and, you know, that's not what I'm saying. You know, and you're not a robot. You're seeing things so crystal clearly and not arguing with them.
Is it more acceptance? That's what it is.
Acceptance of how things are?
It just is, yes.
It just, yeah. Well, first you have to see it how it is. Then you have to accept it, right? And most people don't even see it as it is. They think that they're permanent. They think that, you know, it's so crazy what people think. When you can see so plainly it's not true. You know what I mean? And yes, acceptance of what's so, right? It's, I mean, look, you're always going to accept what's so, whether you like it or not. But you get to decide how long you suffer until you accept it. And the moment you accept it, you're going to feel better. So why not accept it now? Why not just get that life is full of impermanence and full of change? You know, that there's nothing I can do about it. I can walk out the door right now, get hit by lightning, and it's over. Who cares? I can't do anything about that. But I'm here in this moment, and I really want to enjoy this moment. Till there are no more moments, and one day there'll be no more moments, at least not like this. What are you thinking, Jamie? Would you grab a mic?
That I guess to some extent, is there healthy fear?
I don't know about healthy fear, useful fear. I might call it useful fear. You know, like if a dog comes foaming at the mouth and running at you, you know what I mean?
Well, but what about I don't know, being afraid that you'll be late for something, so you're...
You see, you don't need the fear for that. See, a better conversation would be integrity there. You know what I mean? You know, having a commitment to integrity doesn't require fear. But it's interesting the way that you're talking. You know, that isn't there like good fear doesn't? No. Fear, you don't want fear to be your motivator. Because it's going to push you in directions that you don't want to go. You know, instead, you want love and consciousness to be your motivator, and you want to sit up and look around with your eyes wide open, seeing clearly, moving in a very specific direction that you choose consciously. You know, that's the difference between, being motivated by fear and living a conscious life. You know, the fear that I'm thinking of is more the fight or flight fear. You know what I mean? That the mind takes over and you're 2 miles away before you can even realize what happened. But this little, like, everyday fear, no, live without it. You don't need it. What do you need it for? And when you say that, you know, like the fear of being late or something like that, like you're cultivating fear inside you. You never want to do that. You never want to encourage it. You never want to cultivate it. You want to let it go like a hot coal as quickly as you can. What you want to cultivate is consciousness, clarity, peacefulness, presence. And that will be all the motivation that you need. You don't need fear to motivate you, and typically it's just very poor motivation that doesn't last very long. It lasts until the fear is gone. But we don't want to cultivate this. Be very clear about this. These anxious states, these fearful states, we don't want to cultivate them. We want to do the opposite. We want to let it go as quickly as possible and come back to presence and peace and rest in our true nature of loving kindness. Yeah? Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what about some professional athletes always say that they get, butterflies in their stomach, a little bit of fear when they're about to step out on the whatever their playing field is.
Yeah, but the ones that excel, I mean, I'm not saying that fear is not going to be there, right? The butterflies come, the excitement come, right? But do you know how an athlete gets in the zone? Mm-hmm. That is pure presence. That is not fear doing that. That is the place of no fear. I mean, I remember, I think it was, it was either Michael Jordan or Duncan who said, sometimes I'm out there and it's just like throwing the basketball in a lake, And you've seen these guys that when they're competing, that they're present, they're nowhere else. Every time they throw the ball up, they get nothing but net, and that is not a fear-based state. That is a state absent of fear. So, fear is not a good motivator. If you're at the tee, right, and you're like, I'm just so afraid to miss this one, what are you going to do 9 out of 10 times? You're going to shank it every time. But the best shots that I ever hit in golf were the ones I just kind of walked up nonchalantly to the tee, kind of thinking that I was going to knock it into the woods, and just took an easy swing and pow, right down the middle. When I was thinking the least about it, when I had no attachment to it, I just crank them right down the middle. When I'm trying, I buy a lot of balls when I golf. These uncomfortable states we don't ever want to cultivate. Why? Love is such a better motivator. Love, integrity, kindness, compassion. Always doing your best, right? The 4 agreements. Let's continue.
If I handed you an ice cube and it began to melt, would you be upset? Would you be afraid? Of course not, because the nature of ice cubes is that they melt. You are an ice cube. I am an ice cube. Everyone we love and our pets are ice cubes. Everything we think we own is ice cubes. Our jobs, our money, ice cubes. When you realize the impermanence is the nature of this existence, all reasons to fear leave you.
True? It's true. Your mind wants permanence in a world where permanence does not exist. Period. Period. Not feeling well? Okay. Thanks for coming. Huh? Appreciate it. Okay, just put that on a chair, that's fine. Have no fear. Sherry's feeling a little under the weather, so she's going to leave. See impermanence. This is the reality of life. It's all ice cubes and it's all melting. And damn, we don't want it to be that way, but it's just that way. And you know that. So why not dance with it? Why not have fun with it? Why not just allow it to be as it truly is? What are you feeling right now? This is good news, by the way. This is, don't look so down. I mean, come on. Like, this is like, yeah, you know, this is reality. You've always known this. What I'm telling you right now, you've always known. You've always known. Yet, we've ignored it. We've insulated ourselves from it. It's something that we don't want to experience. But it's what's so. It's what's so. Enlightenment. Seeing things clearly as they are. See clearly life. See clearly how you create suffering for yourself. See clearly fear when it comes. See clearly that you can let it go. See clearly that you're not the thoughts in your mind. See clearly that you can take your attention away from a thought at any time and it disappears. See clearly that suffering is optional. See clearly that the only thing that you have is this moment, and the only place that you've ever been is this moment. And the only place that you can be beyond this moment is off in your head, chasing random illusory thoughts habitually for no reason that may be upsetting you. When you see things clearly as they are, when you see life as it is, what's there to fear? It's not that reality is the way that it is. It's what your mind is doing with the way that it is. That's what makes it undesirable. That's what creates states inside you that you don't want to experience. Comments? Please.
In some areas, it is good that things are not permanent.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah, it's good things are not permanent at times, so it's something to look forward to.
yeah, like Giants season last year. Thank God that ended. Good God, it was awful. You know, when you get a cold and you feel better, you know? When someone's car alarm is going off at 3 o'clock in the morning, how good does it feel when that shuts off? There are times when we're like, yay, change, thank God, right? Yeah, the weather.
When you go through a heartbreak and eventually you come out of it,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Thank God that ends. Because that is no fun. I take great solace in that.
Yes.
That when an uncomfortable state does come, what makes it so much easier for me is that I'm very clear that it's a temporary state.
Yes.
And that's why I can manage so well with it, because I know that one day I'm going to wake up and I'm not going to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that there's really not a whole heck of a lot that I can do about it in the moment other than not inflame it. You know what I mean? Then encourage it and make it worse. You know? But sometimes you're going to feel like crap for sure. And remember that enlightenment, like, you know, enlightened beings, the masters would tell you, sometimes anger arises in them, sometimes negative states arise in them. But it's what you do with that. I have fun with all of that. Can you imagine? I mean, I just see them as expressions of my humanity, and I embrace all my expressions of my humanity, even the uncomfortable ones. And just like, wow. I can't remember what happened. I was feeling some sadness about something, loss of a loved one. I can't remember exactly. And I was just like, wow, this is so cool. I was like, look at how this feels. Look at this expression, you know, this visceral expression of my humanity. I was like, wow, this is an amazing feeling. And I think because I related it to how much I loved too. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of, there was somehow a relationship between my sadness and my love. You know? It was, my sadness was somehow part of my love. And I embraced it. Make sense?
Yes.
That's good. Do we have one more?
Fear hides in the shadows and feeds on your resistance. The moment you shine the light of your consciousness upon it, it begins to evaporate like a puddle on a hot sidewalk in the sun. Your practice is to be aware that fear is lurking in your mind. Shine the flashlight of your attention on consciousness and consciousness on it, and let go of that which you are attached.
Right. So the hardest part of that is really acknowledging that fear is present. That's the hardest part. Because when fear comes, what do you want to do? Run. You want to get away from it. Most people don't want to admit that they're afraid when they're afraid. I'm not afraid. You tell somebody, I think you're a little afraid. I'm not afraid. And then get angry, and then they're angry and afraid. That's charming. What do you think? Is this helpful? Is this useful?
Very useful. Sometimes losing that awareness, reacting.
Yeah, there's another microphone up here. Give Ron his own mic.
Yeah, sometimes it comes and we can be aware of it, but there are times just lose control, and I guess that's part of being human. We can't be perfect all the time.
Yeah. If you are losing control, you notice that you're losing control.
Yes.
You know?
And that little voice, like you said, says, don't do that.
Right.
You shut up, I'm going.
You know, it's interesting. I don't fight with my humanness anymore. You know, I don't have any problem with whatever state that I'm in, because I know that a lot of different things affect those states, from the weather, the barometric pressure, you know, Mars being somewhere it shouldn't be or something like that. And there are lots of things that affect us that we don't even know. So most of the time we don't even know why we feel a little bit off, you know? If you're so fortunate to know why, you know, then you can deal with that rather consciously, you know? And but you work with your humanity. You don't resist it anymore. You're human. You're neurotic. You're screwed up. You're crazy. We all are. This is crazy land. And it's okay. When you start expecting people to not be crazy, that's when you're not seeing things clearly. It's just the way that we are. And we're all different. We live on the same world, not in the same world. We live in the world of our own minds. And so when you see all of this clearly, it's so much more fun to navigate this world, because you're navigating the world sort of on the world's terms and not your terms. Because the world in reality does not care what you think. What's happening is karmically unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. And what you think about it, you know, when you're not in agreement with what's so, that's the problem. And I have just let go of the wheel. I get that whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I stay focused on trying to create the causes and conditions, you know, to try and do the things today that may create the tomorrow that I want, may not, but that's my say in it, you know. all I can do is try to see causality as clearly as possible and do the best I can. But, if you were to ask me 20 years ago, someone told me you're going to be sitting in Florida at the Duncan Center teaching satsang, today, I'd be like, how in the world am I going to get there? I mean, what is going to happen? I mean, that doesn't, here I am. So, I get that life just happens. And I just be in life and I just say yes to what's presented, And I don't know. I don't think too much about it anymore. What's the point? Any comments or questions? What are you thinking, Jamie? I'm just like reading your mind, and I'm like, how's it settling with you?
I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell.
I mean, it definitely makes sense. It's I guess I'm getting hung up on the impermanence side of things.
There's going to be a couple of talks on impermanence coming up. So what we want to do is just tickle that part of your brain today. Okay? And don't be too upset about it. Don't let it freak you out. But just kind of start to open your eyes and just kind of notice, without it disturbing you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Just kind of contemplate it. Just sort of contemplate it. If you're walking on the beach or something like that, just be with it in a way that just kind of that feels good. And just kind of try and take a clear look at impermanence and just kind of see what makes sense. When you first start dabbling in that conversation, it can be a little unsettling. But we're going to talk a lot more about that in the coming weeks. Shall we meditate? Does anybody want to stand up and stretch or use the bathroom or anything? You're welcome to come up and take a cushion if you'd like. I'm going to bring the lights down. I think Jamie is coming back, right? I'm playing with my toys. Okay. So now for the most important part of our satsang meditation. Sit comfortably, and as you hear the sound of the bell, let it clear your mind. Bring your attention to the present moment. take a few moments to relax yourself in your own way. And I encourage you to breathe more and more slowly until you're breathing as slowly as possible without it being uncomfortable. Begin to observe your inner world. Start with your body. Notice any tension, any energies, any emotions. And without any judgment, just breathe and observe what is there. Notice that you are the one that is observing, and that the sensations, the energies, the tensions are observed. Now bring the attention to the breath, to the sensations that the air makes as it moves through your nose. And just rest the attention fully there. notice that when your attention is on the breathing, the sensations in your nose, that you're much less aware of the sensations in the body. This is how powerful your attention is. Now guide the attention to the mind. And observe the mind. You may notice thoughts. You may notice your attention moving to thoughts. But as you look at your mind, notice that thoughts are not the only thing there. What else is there? There are moments of deep silence. As you become aware of the silence in your mind that the thoughts arise in, you may become aware that there is vast amounts of silence, a vast space of silence. Dwell with your attention in this space of silence. And be completely uninterested in any thought that arises. And if you notice your attention wandering away, being distracted by thoughts, bring your attention back to the silence and just breathe. Now that you are present, begin to consciously cultivate feelings of loving kindness, compassion, and patience inside you. Let your love well up inside you. Encourage that loving, kind feeling to come to the surface and enjoy it. It helps to smile. love you all very much. And it's always an honor to share this time and space with you. Free hugs at the end of class. I'll see you next week, and let me know if you're coming wave running with us.